The federal Liberals and the NDP have formed a coalition to keep the Liberals in power until at least the year 2025. To discuss this in more detail is our political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist, Brian Lilley. Now, Brian, I thought the NDP was supposed to be an opposition party. What does this deal really mean?
Well, Jagmeet Singh would tell you that he is still a member of the opposition party and that he will oppose the government. And the government, by the way, and the NDP would both quibble with that word you used, Hal. How dare you call it a coalition? It's not a coalition because the NDP doesn't have seats at the cabinet table. So, they're all playing semantic word games here. It is a coalition. It's not a coalition government per se because they didn't give cabinet seats to the NDP, but they have a coalition. They have a formal agreement, a working agreement to prop each other up until 2025. So the NDP is, saying that they will still oppose certain things, like if the Liberals, put forward a big boost in defense spending, the NDP would oppose that, they say, but they also say that they will want to see a lot of increased spending in other areas. So that will all be in a budget. They're not going to vote down the government over defense spending when they can get all this other goodies. It is semantic wordplay here. And yeah, barring unforeseen circumstances, we've just seen Justin Trudeau turned into a majority prime minister for the next 4 years.
Shouldn't we look at potential term limits like they have in the United States?
That would be difficult to do given our system because in the United States, their constitution actually recognizes the president, which is the only job at the federal level that comes with those term limits. We don't have a constitutional recognition of prime minister. The prime minister is whoever controls the confidence of the House of Commons. And so, people can swap parties and coalitions and do all these different things. So I don't see term limits being something that would work, although Canadians generally don't like to see someone stick around too long. By the end of this agreement, Trudeau will have been prime minister for 10 years, and he says he will continue on and plans to fight through the next election. I'm not sure Canadians will be willing to do that because we haven't given anybody that long of a run in quite some time.
Brian, a key part of the deal is for both pharma and dental care to be rolled out by the federal government, but are these not provincial responsibilities?
Solely and clearly provincial responsibilities. And so it's already being blasted in Quebec. I'm sure we will hear from other premiers as well that will say, you know what, this is not what I signed on for. On the pharmacare program, each province does have their own system for people who don't have prescription benefits paid for by their employer. Quebec has the most advanced, but Alberta has one as well. I was just perusing that. You can buy into Alberta Blue Cross if you're a senior or you're someone who's working but low income. You can buy in to ensure that you've got prescription drug coverage. The goal of this one is universal pharmacare with one single national buyer for all prescription drugs. The idea is, well, that will drive down cost. It will also, Hal, be extremely bureaucratic. And what about the fights between the provinces? Ontario has a significant generic drug manufacturing footprint. Quebec has a very significant name brand pharmaceutical footprint. Which one's going to get preference? Because I can tell you what the provinces prefer in their own respective plans. So this is going to be a disaster. They say it's about stopping hyper-partisanship and making Parliament work nice and friendly. Yeah, but it's also starting war with the provinces.
Now, Brian, the Prime Minister says this deal, this partnership between the Liberals and the NDP will ensure fiscal responsibility, but you say it may lead to higher spending and higher taxes. Why is that?
Well, it's right in the document that they want higher taxes. The Liberals ran on it in the last election. They said, let's tax those rich banks. They made so much money during the pandemic, so we're going to tax them more. They want to increase the corporate tax rate for banks and insurance companies from 15% to 18%. Then they also have this thing they want them to pay called the Canada Recovery Dividend. So because you did well for the next 4 years, we're going to tax you above and beyond the 18% that we're raising just on your industry. The NDP wants that extended to the oil and gas industry. They want it extended to big box stores. How they define that, I don't know. But so suddenly things at Costco or Walmart will cost more because if they increase taxes, what's a retailer going to do? They're going to push that cost onto you, the consumer. This is going to drive away investment in some of our best industries. Right up there with oil and gas is the financial industry in Canada. Both banks and insurance are major employers, major economic drivers, and we are now going to be punishing them and discouraging them at exactly the wrong time. We're going to make ourselves uncompetitive. And as far as the spending, well, when you're bringing in a national pharmacare plan, you're going to be hiring a lot of people because you're not going to be relying on those insurance companies that you've just said are too successful. You're going to be taxing those, making them lay people off because they're going to shut down the drug plan that you've got with Canada Life or Manulife or any of these firms. Now they're going to be shutting that down and hiring these people as bureaucrats at a higher rate of pay. It's going to lead to dramatically increased spending, which of course will mean higher taxes and higher deficits.
So, Brian, will this coalition or partnership between the Liberals and NDP guarantee that we won't have an election until at least 2025?
No, there's no guarantee in this. And just like the BC Greens and BC NDP, well, that was supposed to last a year longer than it did. But John Horgan saw political opportunity, so he went early. Voters did not end up punishing him for that. We could see the same sort of thing happen here. The Liberals could say, you know what, our fortunes are looking really good right now. Let's go to the polls. Or the NDP could say, this is not living up to our expectations. We're out of here. Any of those things could happen. So while that is the theory that the government will survive till 2025, that's not necessarily how it will go in practice. My bet is if the Liberals see an opportunity to win a majority, they'll take it. If they don't, they'll do the best they can to get close to that 2025 date.
So what does this coalition mean for the Conservative Party of Canada and their leadership race? They're choosing a new leader in September.
And we'll have to wait and see what it means in terms of the leadership race. In the short term, this is great for the Conservatives when it comes to fundraising. The Conservative Party is going to be able to send out emails and letters and make phone calls and say, see, we told you this big, nasty left-wing coalition was coming in. The socialists are taking over. Because let's face it, this is pretty much a merger of the NDP and Liberal ethos. There's no more centrist Liberal Party anymore. The Conservatives are going to be able to bang the drum and say, send us money. We're the only ones that are standing up to this insane level of spending and these other promises that are going on. How different leadership candidates will be able to take advantage of this remains to be seen, but I'm sure that they're all going to be trying to say, well, no, I'm the one that can stand up to the NDP Liberal Justin Trudeau, Jagmeet Singh, Frankenstein government that we've got over there. They'll all be making that claim, and voters will have to determine which candidate they actually think has the best shot at it.
Now, a new poll by Angus Reid shows that the two frontrunners in the race so far for the Tories are Pierre Poilievre and Jean Charest. Each could move support for the Tories as high as 42%, but would do so in different ways. Can you explain?
Yeah, so I mean, this is good news if you want a solid Conservative alternative to the Trudeau Liberal government, because you need to be able to grow. I keep saying this, whoever they choose, they've got to choose someone who can take the party from the 34% that they've received in the last two elections and move them up to 37% or higher to form government. In this Angus Reid poll, it didn't look at all the candidates, and I think the poll was being taken as new people were still entering the race. We might see more people add their names, but it looked at Charest and Poilievre and said, okay, would you consider voting for the Conservatives if they were led by either of these two men? Now, 42%, that would be a solid majority government, and both can, according to Angus Reid, get to 42%, but they draw their support from different areas. Pierre Poilievre wins handily, by 59, 57% support as the guy to do that when you're in Alberta or Saskatchewan, in Manitoba. They're tied at about 37% of the population in BC say they would look to them to do that. But Charest does better in Ontario, in Atlantic Canada, but they're tied in Quebec. which may shock a lot of people, but Charest has a history in Quebec, and some people really don't like him in that province. And so, I think it's 35% for Pierre Poilievre and 33% for Jean Charest. That's effectively a statistical tie. So they draw from different people. Charest also draws from an older crowd, Poilievre from a younger crowd. Both would draw support from Liberal voters, Charest more, but Pierre Poilievre would have 15% of people who voted Liberal in the last election say they would consider voting for the Conservatives led by Poilievre. He also has about 17% of New Democrats, higher than Charest, saying he'd vote for them. But Charest gets almost a third of Liberal voters saying, yeah, we'd consider the Conservatives if he were leader.
Now, Pierre Poilievre has gone on record saying that he would eliminate the carbon tax. Mind you, we've heard other Tory leaders say that in the past and then have a change of heart. But he also said he would strongly support the energy sector here in Canada, which bodes well for Alberta. What has Jean Charest said in regards to the carbon tax and oil and gas?
He said that he is a big supporter of oil and gas. I had an interview with him last week, and we talked about this quite a bit. He said that we've got to get past being a country that says no to everything. We've got to build big projects, and that includes oil and gas. But when it came to reducing carbon emissions, he was all in on something that Premier Scott Moe in Saskatchewan's big on, and that's small modular reactors, which are especially important in far remote communities where part of the year they might be running generators constantly on diesel, which whether you're a supporter of oil and gas or not, running your village on diesel is a pretty polluting way to do it. So these small modular reactors have been a big priority of Scott Moe, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, and New Brunswick's Blaine Higgs. They formed a coalition to put money into it. Jason Kenney is now looking to join them in that. So we talked a lot about that. On the carbon tax, he said he didn't shy away from his past support of a price on carbon, but said it's got to be done smart so that you're not punishing farmers, you're not punishing families. And he said that the current Trudeau plan is definitely not smart. So an interesting take from him, because the easy thing to do would have been to say, well, I have a different position now. He's not shying away from any of the positions that people would say, well, they're controversial. His offer to Conservative voters is take me as I am.
A couple of low-profile MPs, Scott Aitchison and Mark Dalton, have now joined the leadership race to win the CPC. Do these guys have any shot at winning, Brian?
I don't really think so, because a lot of people would be saying, Mark who? Scott, what? Scott Aitchison, for example, is a very successful mayor in Huntsville, which is a small town in cottage country of Ontario. He's well known there, but he's not well known across the country. Mark Dalton, I don't think most Canadians would be able to pick him out of a lineup of Marks. If you said, here's 5 people named Mark, which one is Mark Dalton, the MP? They'd have trouble. These are not people with high name recognition, and that matters when you're running a leadership election. Charest and Poilievre are the front runners. Patrick Brown and Leslyn Lewis, I think, are strong contenders. But once you get beyond them, everybody else is running to raise their profile or push certain issues. I can definitely see a world where Patrick Brown or Leslyn Lewis do very well and exceed expectations. I can't see a world where Roman Baber, Mark Dalton, or Scott Aitchison do very well at all. And in fact, they may drop out by the time the $200,000 is due, because eventually you've got to pay that. And if you realize that you're not going to go forward, that may happen.
Brian, before we let you go, I wanted to chat with you a bit about inflation. Many Canadians are finding it very difficult right now, filling up their tanks, putting food on the table, paying their rent or their mortgage. Inflation went from 5.1 to 5.7%. Any word from the Trudeau Liberals about more help for Canadians?
No, not at this point. And I don't expect them to be supporting the Conservatives who are calling for a holiday on the GST on gas. Alberta's doing that, lowering the gas price as long as oil is above $90 a barrel. Part of the reason they're able to do that is because their revenues are still going up on other fronts because of the high price of oil. Well, the government could do a GST holiday check or a rebate or some sort of stance. They did that in the past. We're going back 20 years ago, but they've done it in the past. Justin Trudeau is still showing that he doesn't really think about monetary policy. The Bank of Canada, which is independent, is putting up rates slightly, But the central government's still spending big, which is helping to drive inflation. This deal with the NDP is only going to see more government spending, which will hurt matters more. They're really not doing much. And when asked, he just keeps pointing to the National Child Care Plan, which is great if you've got kids in daycare, but it doesn't help seniors or you or me or anybody else with those expensive grocery bills.
That's right. Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.